Hi, everybody. This is Olga from Eagle, and I have a very special guest with me today. This is Sergey Svidov, who is our wonderful tour guide around the Golden Ring cities. A couple months ago, he showed us around the beautiful cities of Suzdal and Vladimir. And we decided that because my guests were so interested in Russian Orthodox icons, that we would record an extra video about icons for you. So Sergey is going to tell us about what is special about Russian icons, who is the most famous Russian icon painter, and where you can find his works. Hi, Sergey. It's wonderful to see you here today.
Good morning, friends. Thank you for coming to watch our video. It is very nice. And today we're going to talk about the Russian icon painting, which is the art of the Russian medieval art, what makes the Russian art really unique, really different from many other countries. And of course, icons are not only in Russia. The word icon actually is the Greek one. It means an image. And it was not just an image of the random person. It was only the religious image. It was allowed to depict Jesus, the Virgin, different saints, angels, and so on. And it was not just a depiction, not like the ancient Greek or ancient Roman portrait, for example. It was to help a person who prayed to realize, to imagine whom he prayed for. Like, for example, if you take an image of Jesus Christ, it was to help a person to realize how Jesus Christ could look like. That was an icon. And for a long time in Russia, like in the Muslim culture, for example, or some other cultures, it was not allowed to depict the real people, not allowed to depict just nature back at the time. No portrait, no landscape, no any other type of art except of the icon painting. Only the religious art was allowed from the very beginning in the 10th century till the times of Peter the Great, till like the late 17th, the early 18th century. And of course, we know very few about those times because not many documents, chronicles, chronicles, the books, written by the monks in the monasteries usually survived from that time. And the other reason for us not to know much about the icon painters and their names was that it was considered to be, not too good to sign your works. They believed back at that time, if you did it well, you were well paid, you lived quite well, but it was like God helped you, like some angel standing behind you moved your hand with a brush. It was not like, not because of you, your skills or something like this. That is why up to them, I think the late 17th century, the 1600s, very few artists ever signed their works. That is why if you know a person, for example, if you know the name, he was already something outstanding, somebody outstanding. And we will talk a little bit about one of those icon painters today. Icons were usually painted on the wood boards, one board or several boards attached to each other. Then they put the layer of sort of the plaster on top of it, called gesso ground, they usually called it in Italy. It was about the same chalk mixed with the glue for it to be white and the smooth surface. And then they used the paints usually made out of natural materials and mixed with the egg yolk, something like glue also, making it stick to the surface of the icon. Sometimes they use the local materials, like local mineral stones. They ground, making the powder out of them. For red, for dark, they could use just charcoal, for example, but something for the sky blue colors or something, even back at that time in the Middle Ages, they could buy from abroad, from Italy, from the Mediterranean area, like lapis lazuli or something like this, because it was not possible to get it here around Moscow, for example. And there are several several peculiarities that makes the icon painting really conventional, different from the realistic painting type of art. One of them is the I always forget the name of that, is the something like reversible perspective, something
Exactly.
like this.
It's non-linear perspective, something like that.
Non-linear perspective, yeah. If you look at this icon, we will talk about it later. Look, there are 3 angels sitting around the table, and the table is not perspective from our point of view. It is smaller in front and bigger in the back. It was not because they didn't know how to paint or they were stupid. No, it was because they tried to show us that, first of all, through the icon, like through the mirror, we look into something like the paradise, the kingdom of heaven, the world that is totally different from our world. And the second reason for the icon to be non-perspective or invertive perspective, something like this, And it was like, if you look at it, you felt yourself being inside. And that really made the job, because when a person came into the church at that time, he must have felt really like on heavens. Because imagine, now we have TV, we have Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. At that time, they had nothing. 6 days a week, they worked hard in the field or elsewhere. And one day, Sunday, or some religious festival, feast, they all came to the church early in the morning. First of all, the people. And the second thing was, they listened to the priest, they listened to the choir that was singing so beautifully. In the Russian Orthodox Church, it was only the a cappella singing. Then in the end of the service, there was like a sermon when the priest talked to them what happened in the world. It was like news, and it was a little bit of, this, our leader was great and beautiful. He did a good job, beating those neighbors, and the leader of the neighbors was very bad, actually, and so on. And around them, there were paintings, those icons or the frescoes painted on the walls. And standing inside the church, they felt themselves as though inside the events, inside what was going on around them. But unfortunately, we know very few about the icon painters, and almost the first names that appeared in the Russian chronicles, in the documents, they appeared only in the late 1300s, in the early 1400s. And one of them, we know also not much about him, but his name was Andrei Rublev. It was already outstanding for that time that the person had not only a name, he had like the second name or the family name, the surname, Rublev. Because for that time, it was normally to be called, even in the official documents, just the slave of the Tsar Dmitry, or the slave of the Tsar Sergei, for example, and that's it, or the son of the smith, for example, like the son of the blacksmith. That person had the first name, Andrei, and the second name, Rublev. So he was very much revered already when he was alive. He was born approximately in 1360 and died around 1430. He was a monk, that's the thing we know for sure. And most of the icon painters, or maybe 99% of them back at that time, were first of all monks, and 100% of them were men. Yeah, because it was not allowed to paint icons for women. The medieval, I don't know, times, you know. And now it's different in Russia. Men and women, monks, nuns, and ordinary civil people can paint icons. But at that time, it was very strict. You had to be a monk before you started painting the image of Jesus Christ, for example. You had to keep a fast for a long period of time, so you didn't eat meat, milk, butter, and you had to pray for a long period of time, as though cleaning yourself spiritually before this kind of job, and only then you were allowed to do this. It is considered that Andrei Rublev was invited to the city called Vladimir, which is about 120 miles east from Moscow, to renovate the beautiful old cathedral that had already been built in the 12th century, 300 years before, but it was burned by Mongols during the Mongol invasion, and then for a long time it was not renovated, it was in the very bad condition. And the Prince of Moscow, whose name was Basil I, Vasily I at that time, sent his best icon painter to renovate the church, because at that particular time, the church was the place for the coronation ceremonies of the Russian princes. They already lived in Moscow, but from time to time, they had to visit Vladimir to be crowned inside the cathedral. So it was very important for them. And we know for sure, it is said in the Russian chronicles that Andrei Rublev painted the Church of the Dormition, or the Assumption of Vladimir, in 1408. And then he lived for some period of time in the so-called Holy Trinity Monastery, or Lavra, in the place called Sergiev Posad, which is like 30 miles far from Moscow. And he painted the beautiful icon called the Holy Trinity for that Holy Trinity Monastery, that is considered to be the real masterpiece of the Russian art and the world art. And now the icon is in the State Tretyakov Art Gallery, in the biggest art museum of Russia, but it was originally painted for that church.
What makes both Andrei Rublev and the Holy Trinity icon so special? Why was he the one who is the only icon painter that is known, or the most famous one?
Yeah, first of all, look, the time was very hard for Russia. It was the time of a sort of the civil war. The country we know as Russia now, even the European part of it around Moscow, was very much disunited. Moscow was like the separate state. The city called Tver, Tver, the separate one. Nizhny Novgorod, the third independent state, and all of them were controlled by Mongols, the so-called Golden Horde, the descendants of Genghis Khan Empire. And it was very easy for the people from the city called Nizhny Novgorod to invite Mongols to attack, destroy, and rob the city of Vladimir, for example. But all of a sudden, there was that monk whose name was Saint Sergius of Radonezh, who started telling the people, come on, guys, what are you doing? You're speaking the same language, Russian, like the people from Moscow and the people from Vladimir. You pray the same God. Yeah, you're all Russian Orthodox. Why you invite Mongols? Like originally they were pagans. By that time, they started converting into Islam to fight each other, to help you fight each other. What if we unite, we combine our forces to protect ourselves from Mongols? And the people started listening to Saint Sergius. but they needed something. As I said, there was no TV and any other sources of propaganda except of the monumental propaganda. Yeah, that was the church that was frescoes and paintings inside, and that Andrei Rublev was like the disciple of Saint Sergius of Radonezh, and he tried to move those ideas from like the social sphere into the art, to explain the people why they needed to unite. And that icon, Holy Trinity, was like the source of that propaganda. Of course, first of all, it was religious. It was like three angels sitting around the table that symbolically were like decreed, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But the problem was how to depict the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Nobody ever seen the Father, for example. That is why already before Rublev, there was the tradition to depict them in the shape of three angels. In the book of Genesis, in the Old Testament, the Bible, there was the event described, like was the man whose name was Abraham and his wife Sarah, that were quite senior already. And once they were visited by three angels that told them that they were going to have a son very soon. They laughed at them because they thought they were too old for that. But later on, they had Isaac. Abraham had Isaac. And they realized that the people that had visited them, they were angels. They were like God, three hypostases of God, the Holy Trinity. And usually, even before Rublev, they depicted them, but there was like the whole event. Abraham, like serving lunch, for those guys, Sarah cooking something in her house. Sometimes icon painters depicted so many people. The scene was so detailed that they depicted even the curious neighbors that were looking through the window. Who came to visit their neighbors, and how Sarah was cooking, chopping vegetables and so on. So Rublev decided to depict this in the totally different way. He got rid of all what he thought unnecessary. No Sarah, no Abraham, no neighbors, only three angels sitting around the table. But anyway, an icon painter had to show us, had to tell us who the Father was, the Son and the Holy Spirit. And look, you will see probably on the photo, there on the screen, that behind the angel on the left, there's the house depicted, something like the big structure. That symbolically means that this person on the left is God the Father, who was the creator of the world, the architect of our world, our universe. The colors of his clothing, they're slightly blue and slightly even pink, symbolizing the colors of the skies, the colors of the paradise, the kingdom of heaven. The person in the middle of the composition, the angel in the middle, symbolizes Son, Jesus Christ. Behind him, there is the tree. That's like the green tree of life, and the symbol of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And at the same time, it's the symbol of the cross, of the crucifixion, the wooden cross. That is why that's the tree, the wood behind. And his clothing, they are on the right blue, again, the symbol of the divine nature of Jesus Christ. And on the left, it's red, like blood, the symbol of the human nature of Jesus Christ, divine and human nature. And on the right, there's the angel who's got the mountain, the big mount, high mount behind him. That symbolizes that this person on the left, on the right, was Holy Spirit. Something like flying very high in the skies and so on, so on. So Andrei Rublev tried to tell us the whole story. It's like the text without any details, just with several figures, depicted here, and three attributes, three things behind them. Then the scientists say that this person on the left, like God the Father, as though pushes the cup that stands here in the middle. There's like the cup of the sacrifice. There's actually the head of veal here in the head of calf, sorry, the head of calf here in the middle, like the sacrifice. And God the Father as though pushes this cup, and God the Son on the one hand like is blessing the cup from the top, and at the same time he's as though also trying to push it away, saying, oh, Father, let this cup pass by me, like from the Bible, something like this. There's like the whole action, it only seems to be static, but any icon is the real action. And if you look at this icon from the distance, this shape of one angel, the other angel look like a cup as well. Like the cup starts here, then goes wide and ends somewhere here between the foreheads of the angel on the left, the angel on the right. Again, symbolizing the cup of the sacrifice. Then the second thing the historians noticed, if you put the line between the foreheads of two angels and one line here, it's like the cross of the crucifixion. And there's like the symbol of the whole universe. Look, if we like paint the line from the foot of the angel around to the head of one of them, the other one, and the third one, and again to here, to the feet of God the Father, that's an accurate circle. It's like the Vitruvian Man, of Leonardo, like the cross inside the circle, the cup, plus between the heads of the angels and the bottom of the painting, there's the triangle, like the equilateral triangle, something like this. Both sides of the triangle are equal. So a lot of symbols, and the people at that time, of course, could read them, I guess, and even now we can read them. That's like the whole prayer. Plus, inside this table, the table of the sacrifice, there's the little hole, like the window. Some people say that that was like the hole for relics of the saint. It symbolized, the altar they prayed on, and that was for the relics. But some people say there is nothing depicted here. There's just like the hole, like the window again to that world through the mirror, through the looking glass. Probably the icon painter, Andrei Rublev, tried to help us look through that looking glass, through the mirror behind.
Wow, this is incredible. I couldn't help but notice when you were showing us that the three figures form the shape of a cup. In that way, the Son, or Jesus, is in the cup, right? So he is the sacrifice in a way, right?
Absolutely.
Kind of like adds to it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Another interesting thing, I think, is that when we look at Andrei Rublev's icons, in general, Russian Orthodox icons, there's not a lot of stuff on the background, right? And like sometimes when we look at them, it looks like it's just a golden background. Does it have something to do with the fact that this is not really the real world, but this is the divine kingdom that you were telling us about?
Yes, I think so. First of all, they tried to show us that all gold behind means that, yes, that was the divine kingdom. Too many little details could probably like meditating, because when they watched the icon, when they looked at the icon, they had to think more, they had to pray, not to read the story like this person goes here, this person goes there. And the other reason for so much gold light and the other bright lights, a lot of white sometimes, was right at that time, like the 1200s, the 1300s, the 1400s, many things like theology was coming to Russia from the Byzantine Empire. And there was the philosophy there, the philosopher whose name was Gregory Palamas. You can Google actually, about this person who tried to explain the people that if they just watched a lot at the icon and prayed hard, they could see the so-called holy light. That was like the light around Jesus Christ during that transfiguration of Jesus scene, when he came up to the Tabor Mount and his clothing became as white as light. And it was something similar to our meditation, actually, to Vipassana, something like this. And probably Rublev knew a lot about those ancient Oriental traditions, and he tried to depict fewer details, but more light, like to impress a person, to help him meditate. Of course, I know that word meditation doesn't correspond to this time, in the Russian icon painting, but it helps us to understand. Yeah.
Wow, this is incredible. Thank you so much for telling us about the Holy Trinity. Is this the only work by Andrei Rublev that is known to people now, or are there more works?
Look, there are some other works. Some of them are like questionable. Some historians say that they were painted by Rublev. Some of them disagree. There are the frescoes in the little town nearby Moscow called Zvenigorod. This is about maybe 50 miles west from Moscow. There are several icons painted on the wood boards in the Tretyakov Art Gallery that, for example, 50 years ago, all historians were sure that there were Rublev icons. But now some of them say that the last works, the last researches were in 2017, just recently. And they say, no, those icons are painted by the different person, similar, but probably by the disciple of Rublev. The other work that is 100%, most of the people think Rublev frescoes, they are in the little monastery nearby, actually nearby the Moscow downtown. It's called Andronikov Monastery. Now there is the active museum there called the museum in the name of Andrei Rublev, but they are just, several square inches, just literally several square inches of the floral ornament on the wall. And the biggest part of the frescoes by Rublev survived in the city called Vladimir, which is a bit more than 100 miles east from Moscow, inside the Cathedral of the Dormition of the Virgin. And the frescoes there were painted in 1408, and then they were covered with a different layer of plaster later on that helped them to survive. And then already in the Soviet times, in the 20th century, the restorers discovered them from the 17th and the 19th century layers of plaster, and they were opened, and now they're really beautiful. They depict the so-called Last Judgment, the central scene also of the church. Usually, like the people standing, in the Russian Orthodox Church, there are no pews, no place to take a seat, They were standing, listening to the priest, and then they turned back to go back home. And usually in front of them, there were the scenes of the Last Judgment. Before Rublev, the icon painters liked to paint hell predominantly, for what particular scene, what particular torture was waiting for you in there, like now people joke for the dealers of the new cars, they had to be the special separate pot, you know, where they were boiled because the prices are very high. And Rublev was thinking a lot how to depict the Last Judgment for it to be not so scareful for the people, for it to be very attractive otherwise. And in the Cathedral of the Assumption in Vladimir, you can see that there is the very little part of it dedicated to hell. Just several, I don't know, again, several tens square inches. All the rest is the judgment itself and the paradise, the kingdom of heaven. Like here, angels sitting right and left from Jesus Christ, again, their faces as though lit inside with a special holy golden light. A lot of golden tints, you know, as we were talking about. And at that time, of course, these frescoes are 600 years old. They were much brighter. And of course, they were very impressive for the people. And these people, these saints, they didn't even look at the people down there standing on the floor of the church. They were like talking to each other. And the icon painter tried to say that probably not like if you guys are bad here, you know, you would go to hell, you know, and they would boil you in the oil like French fries in McDonald's. Otherwise, if you behave yourself here, you would be this golden there in the paradise, in the kingdom of heaven, attracting people instead of scaring people. Jesus Christ in the middle. So I've sent you, you know, some photos, you can attach them. He points one hand up, one down, as though saying that, yes, some people, you know, if they behave, go to the paradise, the kingdom of heaven. Some people go the other way. Those judges sitting left and right, they are apostles with the books in their hands, and every apostle has got a couple of letters in this book, something like MT means Matthew, LK, Luke, that helps us to understand, just pointing at the apostles. And behind them, there is the massive amount of angels, like we've seen on this little photo. And frescoes by Rublev are in the middle. And next to them, in the same cathedral, you see the frescoes painted at the same year, 1408, but by the teacher of Andrei Rublev. We know his name as well. His name was Daniel Chorny. Chorny means black, probably because the vestments of the Russian monks were black, and black meant a monk, you know, Daniel. Saints are heavier, like bigger. The colors are gray, green, not that golden. And probably the teacher got used more to that Byzantine type of art, more traditional, and his disciple stepped aside, stepped forward. Yeah, he risked a lot because we know in the Middle Ages, they could just burn you, you know, for this, for painting, not traditionally, but the people liked this type of painting so much that 100 years after Rublev died, there was the special like synod, no, the council of the Russian Orthodox Church that said that all icon painters had to follow Rublev's manner from that time. So he took a risk, he risked, and he won, actually.
Gosh, I love this. Sergey, thank you so much for telling us about all of these icons. I think that without your explanations, it would be really hard for viewers, even Russian viewers, to understand what is so special about these icons and why Andrei Rublev really stands out. I think that one other way that at least guests of mine hear about him is because, you know, those of them who like cinema, they might have heard of the film called Andrei Rublev by Andrei Tarkovsky. And I personally really like this film, and I do recommend it to people. But since you are the expert in Andrei Rublev, what would you say about this movie?
Now there are also different points of view, but of course the movie is worth watching, first of all. It was filmed in 1964 and allowed in the Soviet Union in 1969 only. So for 5 years, it was like a dispute, the argument, because for the very communist country, it was nonsense to show the movie about a monk, the icon painter. But so anyway, they allowed that, and it was something special at that time. First of all, Tarkovsky was a great film director, He filmed exactly at the places, at the spots where the events took place. So he was filming in the city called Vladimir, in the little town called Suzdal, and around Vladimir and Suzdal. You see the real Russian architecture, the real masterpieces. You see the real frescoes by Andrei Rublev. But since, as I said, we know very few about the icon painter himself, of course, many events in that film were made up. Because, we don't know exactly how come Rublev, met this person or this girl, for example. And in the movie, they show how Tatar Mongols were attacking Vladimir and destroying everything and burning. Also, it's not that correct historically, because Rublev painted the church in 1408. And that particular invasion, there were several of them, was in 1410. So like 3 years later. But Tarkovsky and the screenplay writer, whose name was Andrei Konchalovsky, they combined this, for it to be interesting, of course, and so on. So it's a sort of the ancient Russian fantasy. Yeah, in some way, I mean, historically, if you take the events, it's a fantasy. But if we talk about the artistic value of the movie, it's really high, I think. Some people now don't quite like Tarkovsky, because back at that time in 1960, he was quite cruel to, animals. He, filmed horses, he filmed cows, and when he needed to make like the battle scene, for example, the horses, like one horse fell from the wall and actually really broke a leg, something like this. But it was in 1964, and at that time, it was normal, not only in Russia, probably, during the big battle scenes, to do the things like this. But the artistic value of the film is really great.
Wow, so he was a cruel genius. Wow, I had no idea about that. This is something to know and keep in mind for sure in the modern world. Wow, well, Sergey, thank you so much for being with us today. You told us so much about I feel like, Russian icon painting in general, so that we can decipher them when we look at icons. We learned so much about Andrei Rublev, both from historic perspective, artistic perspective, cinema perspective. And I think that, guys, if you all got interested in ancient Russian history, you just absolutely have to come to Russia, explore the golden ring of Russia. Sergey is the absolute most perfect tour guide for that. So if you are interested, you can find his information in the video description. If you want to learn more about Russian history and art history, please subscribe to this channel and you can get a lot more videos like this. And let us know if you have any questions for Sergey in the comments, and I'll see you around.
Thank you very much. Bye.